So I think when turning points happen, and they usually catch people off guard, the natural instinct is to look around and look for what's salient and maybe connect the dots and say, this made that happen. And certainly the trade war, the real onset of the hard trade war developments seemed to coincide with the global industrial slowdown that we've been experiencing. But actually, as you say, the industrial slowdown began quite a bit earlier. And now everybody is, hanging on bated breath. What's the next development in the trade war? Tomorrow the president's going to be speaking in New York. Is he going to give anything away in terms of what the next development is? Everybody's waiting to hear that. But meantime, the cycle itself is moving along. And our work is showing that the forward-looking data, the leading indicators of global industrial growth, not actual global industrial growth, but the leading indicators have started to move up. And so we are much more oriented. We're much more ready to see an upturn in global industrial growth, with or without the trade war ending.
Keep them for another 3 blocks. Crisis over.
Well, Lakshman, I mean, if the industrial cycle globally is going to see a stabilization, maybe beginnings of a turn up, we have to have China driving that, don't we? What's going on in China?
Yeah, it's interesting what's what here. So the U.S., by the way, the manufacturing cycle is still decelerating. Europe, I think, is where everything is actually started in terms of the global industrial upturn. They seem in many ways even just becoming less bad to have kind of kicked this off. And you're right. In China, our leading indicators of of Chinese industrial production growth have begun to improve. I know that the PMIs, the official PMI or the Shenzhen PMI are giving conflicting signals at the moment, but our leading indicator of Chinese industrial growth is moving to the upside. They are participating. I think other kind of Asia, ex-Japan economies are already starting to participate as well.
Last one, very quickly here, and I want to come back and continue on this. Buried in your report is a trench in 4 or 5 paragraphs where you are adamant manufacturing is not flat on its back. What's the vector on U.S. manufacturing right now?
Well, we are at the end of the line, I'm afraid, in terms of the global manufacturing cycles. We went in to the downturn later than the rest of the world, and we do not have any clear signs of an upturn there yet, and in U.S. manufacturing. And we are seeing some bottoming in our hopefully, we don't know that it's bottoming, but perhaps bottoming in the U.S. manufacturing indicators. The problem, the fly in the ointment in the United States, is the employment cycle, the job cycle. That is still cycling down, and I think it's still happening in manufacturing. It gets a little difficult to read with the GM strike, but it's there, and that's worrisome.
Very good. We'll come back. Lakshman Achathan with us from London today. He is, of course, with the Economic Cycle Research Institute as well. A lovely email in from Detroit. Not in the Red Wings. Worse than that is the Lions. Michael Barr joins us now. Bloomberg Business Sports. Green Bay. It looks awesome this year.
Well, I love the snow.
Yes, it's football season when it's snowing.
I mean, this is real football, folks. There's never a score above 20 points. Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago, and Detroit.
Black and blue division. Now that's football.
Is it? Do they play the same modern game, or is there still a more, off tackle, 3 yards in a cloud of dust?
Well, 3 yards in a cloud of snow. That's about it. But I mean, it's still a brutal division. Once we went to the Dome, though, I wish we would have just stayed outdoors.
Yeah, the Dome, it's just not the same.
Chicago, they're still outdoors. Right?
Oh, yeah.
The more manly game.
Yes,
Chicago. Coming into the manly season now. You want me to sit in the stand for that ticket price? Anyways, we'll continue here. Detroit Lions having a difficult weekend, to say the least. We have the markets open, equity markets open, bond markets closed today for this important day for our military serving worldwide. We say good morning to all of you who have served and are present serving, particularly those of you with children who are serving. That's its own burden as well. Please stay with us. Bloomberg surveillance with the Dow, a negative 116. This is Bloomberg.
Let's get national headlines right now with Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Tom. After 14 terms, Republican Representative Peter King of New York says he will not run for another term of office in 2020. King, speaking to ABC Radio, says it was not an easy decision.
It was a season for everything, and after 14 terms, 28 years, and that's 4 days a week in Washington, I just felt it was time to do something different, stay here in Seaford, and spend more time with my family.
King says President Trump's ongoing impeachment battle did not factor into his decision. Bolivia has entered a sudden era of political uncertainty with the resignation of President Evo Morales. It comes after a push by the military and weeks of massive protests. The resignation of every constitutionally designated successor has left unclear who would take his place. President Trump and the First Lady will attend the New York City Veterans Day Parade today. They'll lay a and the president will deliver remarks and offer a tribute to the men and women who served this country during the opening ceremony of the annual event. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom.
Thank you, Michael Barr. What's moving on the screen? Well, the market negative 130, 27,551 on the Dow. Sterling higher. Mr. Farage tossing over votes to Mr. Johnson. Big news in the world of Brexit. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
I had the radio on. I was driving. Trees went by. Me and Del were singing. Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuit.
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another windy day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and enjoy stunning white sand and crystal blue sea. Fly from London Gatwick to the Maldives with British Airways from £300 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Ends tomorrow. Book at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Witch Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. so you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
With the new Halifax Family Boost mortgage, children can get help to buy their first home, and mum and dad earn interest on their savings. Everyone's a winner. The new Halifax Family Boost mortgage. Halifax makes it happen.
Your home and savings could be at risk if mortgage repayments are not maintained. Only available in England and Wales. One applicant must hold a Halifax Reward or Ultimate Reward current account. Conditions and exclusions apply.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to discover what's happening in the app and around the world. Be the first to know about upcoming games and the hottest new music. Follow @TuneIn and always be in the know.
Want to know what's happening in right now? The latest headlines are just a tap away with Fox News Talk on TuneIn. When news breaks, get up-to-the-minute coverage on developing stories from around the world. Plus, hear all the Fox shows you watch on your TV. Listen to Fox News Talk around the clock on TuneIn.
Guard takes the snap. He'll hand off Jacobs straight ahead across the 15. Breaks and tackle 10. Across the 5. End zone. Touchdown.
Tonight, TuneIn has your Monday night NFL football with the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers. Kickoff at 8:15 p.m. Eastern.
It's caught on the near side by Jarwin, the tight end 30. Down the near sideline, the 20. Got a block at the 15. Breaks and tackle 10. Down the sideline 5. He's in for the touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says President Trump's dealings with Ukraine, involving military aid and a demand for an investigation into Democrats, were unimpeachable.
The Ukrainians never did the investigation. And the president released the funds. I mean, when you look at those, there's just nothing impeachable there.
While promoting her new book, Haley was interviewed by CBS News. On this Veterans Day, President Trump will pay tribute to America's service members in New York. Meteorologist Padram Javaheri has his eye on some bitterly cold weather moving into the Midwest.
Multiple rounds of this here in store, already seeing the impacts across the northern plains, portions of the Great Lakes, and all of that eventually pushing in across portions of the Northeast. You even get a decent amount of snow showers there into the higher elevations of the favorable regions across the eastern Great Lakes.
A violent day in Hong Kong where police opened fire with live rounds. At least one pro-democracy protester was wounded. I'm Jan Johnson.
The world's top business and political leaders prefer to speak to someone who understands them.
We're looking right now at the White House.
Balance the Power with David Weston. Weekdays at noon Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stocks are falling amid concern that the U.S. and China are struggling to get an initial trade deal done. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 down 0.4% or 12 points at 3080. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.33% or 96 points to 27,584. And the Nasdaq's down 0.5% or 38 points to 8436. The U.S. bond market closed today in observance of the Veterans Day holiday. NYMEX crude oil down 0.8% or 45 cents at 56.78 a barrel. COMEX gold little change down 60 cents at 14.6220 an ounce. The euro 1.1034 against the dollar. The yen is at 109. OpenText announced a deal to acquire Carbonite, a provider of data protection services, for about $800 million in cash. Carbonite up 24.5% this morning. Walgreens Boots Alliance up 6%. Sources tell Bloomberg that KKR has formally approached the drugstore giant about what could be the biggest ever leveraged buyout. And sources tell Bloomberg Goldman Sachs Group is leaning away from a target of finding $5 billion in extra revenue by next year. The Wall Street Bank will tout a wider range of financial metrics at an investor day in January. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Getting negative 100 plus, now negative 85. A little better tape in the last 20 minutes. Paul Sweeney and Tom King. We continue with Lakshman Achathan, Economic Cycle Research Institute, with a more enthusiastic call here. Lakshman, how do you treat the labor economy? You mentioned earlier we're getting vectors, glide paths of job formation that aren't so constructive. How do you, within the heritage and history of economic cycle research, treat the labor economy?
Oh, thank you. You mentioned Jeffrey Moore earlier, my mentor. He one of his past positions was as Commissioner of Labor Statistics, and he set up things like the Employment Cost Index and all of this because jobs are so central to the business cycle. A recession is not simply 2 quarters of negative GDP. You have to have negative jobs growth, also falling incomes and sales. So jobs are critical. The way we treat it, the way Dr. Moore established it, and the way we continue to treat it is that there's a separate cycle in jobs that can sometimes turn a little different than the cycle in production. And we have leading indicators specific to the job cycle. Those indicators hit a 10-year low in their growth rate several months ago. They've bounced a little off of that, but they're not in a cyclical upturn, which means that the ongoing deceleration in jobs growth that has been very apparent all year is set to continue. This is a real concern because the consumer is supposed to offset the weakness in manufacturing in the United States. And certainly if the jobs market is weakening up, that'll be a problem. Now, I know some people will say that, hey, unemployment's super low. What's the big deal? Things are slowing just because there's no one left to hire. And if you do the work and you do the seasonal adjustment, you can go in and see that actually in the construction part of the economy, the jobless rate has risen by 2 full percentage points. In the manufacturing, in the goods sector, it's risen by a full percentage point. And in services, 2/3 of services unemployment, the different sectors, are actually well off their lows. It's education and healthcare, financial services, where there's actually, and listeners may like this, there's actually a cyclical turn in manufacturing, in financial services because of rates coming down so far. Those are the areas adding jobs. The rest of it, the breadth of jobs gains is really plunging. That's a big risk factor. That's what keeps me concerned about the U.S.
So, Lakshman, let's stay on the labor front. We are, in fact, at a very low unemployment rate, yet we're only seeing wage growth in that 3% range. Are you surprised it's not more robust?
Not really, because when you have, what happens is average hourly earnings is really aggregate hours and aggregate pay, the ratio of those two things. So after a long expansion, you have hired most of the people that you'd wish to hire, and you don't want to lose them even when the economy is slowing. So the way that you retain them and still maintain some profitability is you actually lower the aggregate hours, which is weighing on average hourly earnings. And so that's the real kind of culprit here. It's cyclically consistent with what we're seeing.
So turning over to the trade situation, we just got through the third quarter earnings, a lot of CEOs talking about uncertainty associated with the trade, and that might be holding back business investment. Is that real from your data?
Well, yeah, certainly the lack of business investment is. That's absolutely consistent with what we're seeing. When we look at cycles in investment, we talk about what we call the 3 C's, like in CAT, or Charlie. They have to have cash, they have to have confidence, and they have to have capacity constraints. And they have access to cash either literally or through credit, so that's not really the problem. It's more about the confidence, which, if you note, CEO confidence is really bad. And then the capacity constraints, and you don't have a lot of capacity constraints, for the most part, for the economy as a whole. So not a lot of demand for business investment. It may also be, a knock-on effect from the really low rates keeping a lot of capacity online here and around the world, so that there's not a big need for investment. But I don't think it's all about the trade war. I think it's about just actual economic activity. And so going back to the constructive part of this, if global industrial growth is bottoming, in particular outside the U.S., globally, we're going to start to get a little traction, and the U.S. may just lag.
This has been wonderful, Lachman. Thank you so much. Lachman Hutchison with us with the Economic Cycle Research Institute from London today. Again, the Dow negative 100 and change. Now a little bit of call it a 953 bounce as well. Joining us in the studios right now, a gentleman expert on impeachment hearings, David Weston joins us. You've been boning up. I went back to 1868. Andrew Johnson crushed in the House. They didn't like what he said. Yeah. And I guess he was okay in the Senate by one vote.
Exactly right. He did not although it was the end of the presidency.
Yeah, but each of these is different. And David, as you on Balance of Power approach this week's festivities, this one seems to be original too.
They're all original. Exactly right, Tom. The real question is anything we're going to see in these hearings going to change the minds of Americans? Because if you look at the polling, it's pretty much all the Republicans are against, all the Democrats are for, and the images are split right down.
So it's like Andrew Johnson. Frankly, it's a lot like 1868.
Exactly. It will raise interesting questions about the Democratic senators running for president and where they will be come February, March if they're in trial.
If we have hearings, and I asked Ann Edgerton this and got the same answer I think I'm going to get from you, do we have a clue what they're going to be other than lectures by both parties? Are questions asked?
Sure. If you have a trial in the Senate, there will be examination, cross-examination. We had that with Clinton. Certainly there will be questions asked, not only from the members, but also counsel will be present to cross-examine. And, it's like a jury trial. They're going to try to put the witnesses on trial.
It's like this week in these meetings, it's like, that's a loaded statement, like a jury trial.
Yeah, it will be like a jury. And the jury is the American people. That's the theory here, is the American people will get to look them in the eye and decide, do we believe you or not believe you?
What are some of the more interesting, people that are going to be testifying in the coming week or two?
Well, clearly the senior most diplomatic official in Ukraine is the lead-off witness, and he'll be very important. The woman who was displaced will be very important. But then the real question is, do they call Hunter Biden or not? And will Mr. Bolton show up? John Bolton show up? Those are the wild cards.
And is the timing still, try to get this thing wrapped up in the House before Christmas? Is that still the expectation?
Christmas is like tomorrow.
Yeah. And they have very few legislative days. I mean, Nancy Pelosi wants to get it wrapped up, but she says it takes as much time as it's going to take up. I think it's increasingly difficult to get it wrapped up.
To get it done by year end.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Do you have Christmas lists yet?
No. I've
already got Christmas lists. Continue.
So is the expectation still over? I don't know if anything's changed over the weekend, David. The expectation that likely impeached in the House, unlikely to be impeached in the Senate.
Yeah, that is clearly the received wisdom. And people are pretty steadfast in that.
Will there even be a trial in the Senate?
Has to be. And McConnell, the majority leader, has said he will have a trial. And they will go forward with it. And then we'll see if he's in fact acquitted as expected. Will he say, look, I've been vindicated?
Give us a guest today. Who do you have today?
Okay, you know what we have actually is Linda Lacewell. Do you know who that is?
No,
New York State Financial Services Supervisor, because she's the one going after Apple Card and Goldman on the algorithms that was against the women. And of course, it's Veterans Day. And so we have a former head of a bomb disposal battalion, a naval veteran, who has now got a startup to help veterans go into the private sector.
Very good. David Weston, thank you so much. Look for this 12 to 2 today. You can hear it on Bloomberg Radio. You can see it on Bloomberg Television as well. Balance of Power, a wonderful simulcast at 12 noon. Negative 95 on the Dow, Paul. Just a little bit of time here to go. I guess on to the inflation data 2 days from now. Earnings are sort of over.
Earnings are over. So we're giving Dave Wilson a little bit of an off day.
Yeah, media a little bit.
Yeah, so we'll have some, we'll have, you're going to get your new streaming service from Disney tomorrow. So I know just you're going to start binging all your Frozen and all your favorite Disney.
Yeah, I'm all over that. We'll see. Negative 94 in the Dow. The VIX 13.17. The bond market closed today. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
This is
It's another Monday afternoon, yet another windy day. So ditch the British winter and chase the sun across the globe with British Airways from London Gatwick and explore tropical rainforests. Fly from London Gatwick to Costa Rica with British Airways from £218 each way based on a return fare. Don't miss out. Ends tomorrow. Book at ba.com/wintersun with British Airways. Incredible is within reach. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. Selected flights in March.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Which Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. So you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
And what we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City to our worldwide audience. Coming up, we're going to take a look at that Aramco IPO. That prospectus just dropped. Also, Alibaba, Singles Day, $31 billion in sales, a new record. Extraordinary. But right now, let's go to Karen Moscow, Bloomberg Business, for a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Paul, thank you. And we're watching U.S. stocks fall amid concerns that the U.S. and China are struggling to get an initial trade deal done. The dollar's declining. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 1/3%, down 10 points at 3082. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.3% or 84 points at 27,594. And the Nasdaq's down 0.4% or 32 points at 8443. The U.S. bond market is closed today in observance of the Veterans Day holiday. NYMEX crude oil is down 1/3% or 21 cents at 57.02 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.2% or $2.70 at 14.6020 an ounce. The euro 1.1035 against the dollar. The yen is at 109.01. U.S. solar panel maker SunPower to spin off the majority of its global manufacturing operations into a separate company that will be owned by a Chinese firm, and those shares are up 10.4% right now. OpenText announcing a deal to acquire Carbonite, a provider of data protection services, for about $800 million in cash. Carbonite rising up 24.4%. And sources telling Bloomberg that KKR has formally approached drugstore giant Walgreens Boots Alliance about what could be the biggest ever leveraged buyout. Walgreens Boots Alliance is up 6.25%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa.
Thank you so much, Karen. Market Drivers is brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, ranked 53rd in the nation out of more than 4,000 universities for mid-career earnings of its graduates. Learn more at njit.edu. Bond markets closed today for the Veterans Holiday. We are looking at the broad major indices in the U.S., all lower on the stock side, led by the Nasdaq, down 0.4%. Joining us here, Sarah Ponczak, who covers all things equities for us here at Bloomberg in our Interactive Brokers studios. I'm trying to understand what the action today is. Is it a response to Hong Kong? Is it people saying, well, we haven't gotten a trade headline, so let's sell?
So it's a bit of a mixture. For one, we did get some headlines come in regarding trade over the weekend, with President Trump throwing some cold water on the idea that there has been a confirmation that they will, in fact, roll back those tariffs. And if you look at the price action over the past couple weeks, we've had 5 straight weeks of gains for equity markets. We have seen major interest in value cyclicals. We've seen industrials, in financials, in energy, and money flowing out of utilities, real estate, staples, those more safe areas of the market. Well, a lot of that has come on the back of trade optimism and also the idea that we could not only not get those tariffs going into effect in December, but that those tariffs that are already in effect, they will be rolled back. So any idea that won't happen, that'll be an issue considering the optimism we got over the past couple of weeks. Also, when it comes to Hong Kong, though, a couple traders and investors this morning I speak with pointing out the fact that when you think of all the unrest in Hong Kong, we've seen that affecting Hong Kong markets, of course. But when you think about the U.S. market, you have to think about it as well, how it can actually tie into everything going on with U.S. and China and the trade war. Because if President Trump and the United States decides that they don't like everything that is going on in the region and how China is dealing with it, then they could decide to bring a little bit of a harder stance to the trade deal.
Do we have any sense as to when the next big step is going to be on trade? Because we were living, tweet by tweet here in the market, and I know there was, going to be at that conference down in Chile in December. That's canceled. So do we have a sense of timing when this all could kind of come together?
I wish we did, but unfortunately, things are still hanging up in the air a bit. Like you said, the APEC meeting that was scheduled for later this month was canceled, and they still have not decided on a place to hold this signing summit, as they are calling it. And I find it very interesting because over the past couple of weeks, there has been a lot of optimism about China coming to the Trump administration and asking them to roll back these tariffs. Investors taking this to heart, saying, all right, maybe this means we're going to get a deal. These tariffs are going to fall off the back end. But if you think about it on the other side, on the other hand, you can actually view it as an issue. If this is now an ultimatum, if this is now a demand from China, well, that might make it more difficult for the U.S. to actually find terms to come to a deal with. Because if the U.S. decides that they don't want to roll back those tariffs, well, then what is China going to come back with?
All right, so let's talk about, aside from the macro picture, we've got some micro stories. KKR, not so micro, the potentially biggest leverage buyout ever, formally approaching Walgreens Boots Alliance to do this buyout deal, more than $50 billion valuation, about $17 billion of debt. How close to this deal do we get a sense of really whether KKR is?
So it's...
That was Yoda speak, by the way.
It was.
As I was speaking, I decided that I was going to channel Yoda. Carry on.
Well, I will say right away, great reporting by Bloomberg News. They had the scoop on this, but they made sure to put pretty high up in their reporting that it is still unclear how feasible this transaction will actually be. So it does seem that KKR, this had been discussed a bit before, is getting closer and closer, but just because some of the sheer sizes of the numbers, it's still a bit unknown as to whether or not this will actually be able to be followed through.
Although you are seeing a pop in the Walgreens shares, so I mean, the market is treating it as a real possibility here.
Right, shares are up 6.5%. If you look at Walgreens Boots Alliance, 6.5%. Should say, which interestingly enough is only the strongest day in about a month or so. But you have to remember, Walgreens stock is down roughly 30% or so since last December. So it's been a rough ride, and any sense that they are taking steps in the right direction, which the stock market seems to be believing, that taking the company private would be that's seen as a positive.
I think my favorite story so far this morning is that our good friends at Uber, remember the lockup expired last week, and there's a lot of selling and a lot of volume. Well, the story Bloomberg has today is Travis Kalanick, the co-founder, sold about 20% of his stock for $47 million. So he was obviously a big seller during this lockup.
This is my shocked face.
Yeah.
There is no shock on her face. I must illustrate that for you.
Honestly, I mean, the thing The issue here is nobody should be that surprised, but it is a bad look.
It's
that the first day that he could sell, he sells out of 20. % of a fifth of his stake in this company after his incredibly controversial rule over the company. an endorsement.
Stock is down 2.3% today. Again, it's $26 and change. IPO'd at $45. So as Lisa mentioned, just not a good look, is it?
Not a good look at all. And a rough ride. A lot of people have been grouping Uber and Lyft together. I mean, it makes sense. They are both ride-sharing companies, both IPO this year. But now Uber has fallen about double the amount that Lyft has fallen. Lyft has come out and talked about path to profitability, whereas now when you have the lockup period come to an end for Uber, you have Travis Kalanick come out and just dump his stock. So not the nicest thing that you want to say.
Except maybe he's going to use it for cloud kitchens, which is his latest venture, and Saudi Arabia evidently is investing in it. So, from one venture to another, perhaps.
Well, he's got some liquidity now. Good for him. Sarah Ponczak, thank you so much for joining us. Sarah, give us her thoughts on the market as we are, about 40 minutes into trading here.
And coming up, we're going to be talking about oil, in particular, some of the details that we got out of the Saudi Aramco 600-page prospectus that it filed on Saturday, giving us some details into what may be the world's biggest IPO ever, and raising a lot of questions just in general for the oil market, especially ahead of this OPEC Plus meeting.
Yeah, and they highlighted a risk of peak oil potentially. So we'll dig into that. They think peak oil may be 2035 or something like that.
Right, within the next 20 years. But what's interesting is in the past, they have poo-pooed those particular projections and said that was not feasible. Well, this time around, they included it in their prospectus.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have to see how that plays out with investors going forward. That's going to be obviously the huge IPO. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Amy Mars. Amy.
All right, thanks, Paul. The public phase of the House impeachment inquiry starts this week. Open broadcast hearings are planned for Wednesday, it's just day after tomorrow, and for Friday. 3 witnesses who had testified behind closed doors are scheduled to appear again. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer says it is appropriate for the public to witness all of this.
I want it to be open, and I want it to be focused on the issues before us, not to be a wild goose chase.
Democrats signaled their willingness to let some witnesses requested by Republicans testify as the House starts the public impeachment hearings this week, but only those